Hi friends! Today I'm going to teach you how to make a drawstring backpack. I actually got the pattern for this off of a website called sew, as in sewing machine, sewcanshe.com. And I'm going to link this website in my blog, so if you want to hop on my website under sewing patterns and tutorials, you can find this whole tutorial, and I will link this in case you want a printable version of directions. But I think it's helpful, especially for my students, to see it hands-on, so I'm making a tutorial on how to do that today. Like I said, I've used this pattern a few times in my kids' summer camps and everything, and it's a really fun and easy pattern, and so I'm going to share with you today how to do that. What you're going to do is you're going to take your two rectangle casing pieces, flip them over to the wrong side, and with your seam gauge, you're going to take your seam gauge to 1/4 inch, and you're going to fold over the short ends of your casing. Make sure that it's 1/4 inch, and you're going to iron it down. So make sure that you get a good iron there, a good press. You're going to do that on both of your casing pieces. So we're just going to make sure that these are at 1/4 inch. Iron down, and then you're going to repeat down here on the other ends. Okay, now we're going to bring these casing pieces over here, and we are just going to sew pretty close to the edge. We're just sewing our hem down, going close to the edge but not over the edge. So just like that. We just went close to that edge. And we are going to do this on each side that we ironed down. So there's two sides of each casing, and we're doing that on both sides of the casing. Okay, now you're going to take your two 3-inch square pieces. You're going to flip it with wrong sides together, fold it in half, and iron. And then you're going to take the raw edge and you're going to bring it up to that fold line in the middle and press down. And you're going to do that on both sides. We're creating a loop right now for our drawstring to go through. So just bring it there, and then of course bring it back in half where you pressed before. Give it one more press. And then repeat on your second square. Now we're bringing in our little loops that we just ironed, and we're going to top stitch close to both long edges. So on both sides, we're going to come in here and we're going to go close to the edge. I like to bring it down by hand, bring my needle down by hand just so I can see where it lands. And you're just going close to the edge. So there's one side. And we're going to come here on the other side. Whoops, make sure that fabric doesn't get messed up under there. I'm just getting as close as I can to the edge without going over. Back stitching always. And so that's what it will look like when it's done. And you're going to repeat that on your second loop. I am now taking my casing pieces and I'm folding it in half with the wrong sides together, making sure that our edges right here are even. And I'm just going to give it a good press. Notice that I'm kind of picking up the iron as I press instead of just rubbing it along. And the reason I do that is because sometimes when you have fabric folded over like this and you start rubbing it, it pushes the fabric out of place, and then you're not ironing it exactly straight where it needs to iron. So I prefer just to kind of hold it and then just pick it up and move it down. So do that on both pieces. Okay, so now we're going to take one of our exterior pieces. We're going to take one of our casings and we're going to center it at the top. You can see it's about equal distance. So this is centered along the top. So the top is that shorter edge. Remember, it's 15 across this way, 17 that way. So you're putting it across the top. Then you're going to take one of your lining pieces, and you're also, and make sure also that it's your raw edges are even. You're not putting your fold up here because you don't want the raw edges to be exposed down here. So you're matching your raw edges up here, and then you're going to put your lining on top. Sorry, this is kind of hard to do upside down, but I want you to see it the right way. And then keep all of your edges even. And let me grab my pins. And we are going to pin across the top. We are going to be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the rest of this project. So if we're not sewing close to an edge or something like that, like earlier on the casing and the loops, then just know that we are using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now we're going to go back over to our sewing machine and we are going to sew 1/2 inch across. We are going to do the same thing with our second exterior piece, our second casing piece, and lining. So the same thing we're doing to both of them. So you can just get those both ready now so that you're at the machine just doing 2 at the same time instead of taking a break. So we're going to go ahead and pin our second set right now and then take it over to sew. Okay, so now we're just bringing this piece together and we are going to sew across the top, making sure your back stitch. We're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and we're just sewing across the top. We've pinned everything together, our lining, our bag, and then our casing is sandwiched in the middle. And we're just sewing across. And you're going to repeat the same thing on your second piece. Okay, so as you can see, we have our rectangle opened up, the lining in the exterior. This one's our exterior. Not that it matters, I guess, if you're doing the same fabric, but now you're going to take your tabs and you're going to measure 2.5 inches up. You only want to pin these to the exterior, not to the lining piece. So you're going to bring your tab over here to 2.5 inches, making sure that your raw edges, you folded that tab in half and you're putting the raw edges against the raw edge of the bag and just pin it down. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Just place that there, pin it in place, and then we're going to take this over to our machine and baste it down. And now you're just going to baste this across. Don't worry about changing your stitch. Normally, you know, your baste is a longer stitch. It's such a small area, don't even worry about it, but bring it in just inside your 1/2 inch seam allowance and just stitch across just to hold it in place so it doesn't slide out of place while you're putting everything together. So you're going to do that. Make sure that you trim all your long threads because we don't want long threads, and you're going to do that on both sides. So now you're going to put your bag together. So you have your tabs that you've sewn on to this. So this is the exterior. You want to make sure that you match exterior fabric with exterior and lining with lining. If you have the same fabric for both, it doesn't matter. But if you had, you know, like say your lining was a solid color and this was your print, make sure that you're matching your solids and your prints. Because now we're putting the whole thing together. So we're going to place right sides together, one rectangle on top of the other, and we are going to go ahead and pin around the entire bag, just as many pins as you feel that you need to have control. And then we want to make sure that our edges are even. We want our raw edges even. Pinning, remember that you pin into the seam that you're sewing. We're going to be stitching a line going this way, so our pins are going in that way, perpendicular to the seam that we're sewing. For those of you who know and love geometry. And we're just going to pin all the way around. Now we're going to stitch around the whole thing, but we need to leave an opening in our lining. This is my lining piece because down here is where I have my tabs. Remember, I have my little loopholes right here. So that's my exterior piece. This is my lining piece, and you want to leave your opening in your lining piece. So I'm just going to pick any point. This is going to be, actually I'm going to do it on the bottom. We usually leave the opening at the bottom. So if you need to, mark it. I'm just going to mark an X. That side's not working very well. So I'm going to start at 1X, and then I'm going to sew all the way around and stop at my next X. So there I have like a 4-inch opening that I'm going to leave open. I'm not going to sew in between there. I am going to backstitch when I start, and I'm going to backstitch when I end. Okay, so you see that I have my 2 X's. I'm going to start at that bottom X. So put the bottom X under your presser foot, and your raw edges are going to be on 1/2 inch because that's where our seam allowance is. Remember that when you get to the edge, you are going to pivot. Always pivoting in corners. I'm on 1/2 inch, so I'm good. And keep going. And then just stop when you get to your pins and take them out so you don't end up breaking any pins. Okay, we're going to bring this back over to the ironing board, and we are going to clip our edges to but not through. Remember, we clip these edges so that it's not bulky when we flip it. Down there. Okay, now we're going to find where that opening is. It's on this end. We're going to reach in here, come over to, I like to start with one of the corners. So just take that corner and you're just going to pull it through very carefully. And now this is what your bag is going to look like. Press your corners out. You can use a chopstick or your finger, whatever you need to do. Just get in there and push those corners out. So this is the exterior of your bag. This is the lining of your bag. So first thing we want to do is iron out our seams. So remember that you always pull that seam line up to the top, like on that fold, and then we're just going to press it all the way around. I'm at that lining, here the opening, so you want to fold it in 1/2 inch because that's our seam allowance. You want to like fold that in, make sure it's all tucked in there, and we'll iron it down, and then we're going to go and we're going to sew the opening shut. But for now, while we're here at the iron, just kind of tuck that in so it's nice and even and turned in, and then run your iron over it. And then we can just take that over to the machine and sew that opening shut. So here's our opening, and we're just going to go close to the edge, bring it down my hand so you can see where your needle goes. Yes, you will back stitch, and just take it across that opening all the way down, back stitch when you get to the end. And now our lining is closed. Okay, we're back at our ironing board, and now we're going to take one side and the other side, we're going to pull apart, and we're going to stuff the lining inside the bag. So remember, this is the outside of the bag. It has your loops on the bottom. So you're just tucking the lining on the inside. And then we're going to slide the bag into our ironing board and make sure it's nice and flat up here at the top, and then just run your iron across the top with your casing going up. Bring it back to your sewing machine, and we're going to put a top stitch in around here, and that's just going to help to keep the casing from not slipping to the inside. Remember that you can take this part of your machine off when you're doing a circular seam like this. So we are just going to top stitch. So you want to go close to the fold. So I'm just looking at this edge right here is right inside here on my presser foot, just as a reference, so I know that my lines are kind of straight. And you can do a little back stitch if you want. Remember, when you're doing a circle, you'll end up back at the beginning, and you can just go over your stitch line. And we're just going to do this all around the entire bag. And I'm almost back at the beginning, so I'm just going to go over that same stitching. That's the same thing as a back stitch. If you are exactly right on top of that stitch, it's the same thing as a back stitch, so you don't really have to back stitch. If it makes you feel better to back stitch, then go ahead, but you can see like how good that is. You can't see a second line. I just went right over that same stitching line, and so that creates my back stitch so that my threads won't come undone. Make sure that you trim all of your seams. Okay, so now we're done with our bag, and we're going to make our drawstrings. So remember those 3 pieces that you have? We're going to pull these out. The first thing you are going to do is cut off your selvage ends, because we don't want to see those selvages. So just go ahead and cut those off on all of your pieces. Okay, now on one of these pieces, you're going to cut it in half. So it's already folded in half, as you can see. This is one whole piece. It's folded in half. So just take your scissors and cut right here on your fold line. And what you're going to do, because we have 2 sides of the bag and they each need drawstrings, so we're going to unfold all of these, and you're going to take one short end and sew it. Oops, you can see I was a tiny bit off on my cutting, but that's okay. It'll still work out fine. So you're going to take one short end to this long piece and the other short end to your other long piece, and you're just going to sew your 1/2 inch seam allowance across the side there, the short end. So I'm just taking this here, and yes, my edges should be more even. I obviously cut one strap slightly smaller, but we're gonna so 1/2 inch across here. And we will do that with both of our pieces. And then we are going to take it back over to the iron. So first it would help to iron your seam open. And then now we are going to iron this the same way that we did for our 3-inch loops. We're going to fold it in half, wrong sides together. Make sure that your edges are even. You can see I'm keeping my raw edges even. And my cord is stuck. Sorry about that. And we're just going to iron all the way down. And now we're going to do like we did with our little loops. We're going to fold into the middle and just press. You're just folding that raw edge into that fold mark that you just ironed in, and you're going to do that on both sides. All the way down. Okay, so now, and then we're just going to fold it right back in half on that same fold and go all the way down. Okay, so now you have one drawstring all ironed up and ready to go. We're going to take this over to our sewing machine, and we are going to sew close to this edge all the way down. And don't worry about this raw edge. I'll show you how to take care of that at the very end. Before you go and sew this, do the same thing to your second strap with the same thing with the folding and the ironing, and then take both over to your iron and sew close to the edge. Okay, so we're just bringing this in. This is our folded edge. I kind of just follow my 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. Basically, you just want to get close to the edge of your fabric. So you start, back stitch. Now, if you notice how I'm holding this down here, I'm just putting it between my fingers, and this hand here is just kind of to guide it. If you hold it tight enough and you're holding your hand straight, it'll just stay right on that 1/4 inch. You can see I don't really have to stop and move it around. It's staying right on that 1/4 inch seam allowance right here, which is pretty close to the edge of my tape. Or, yes, it's not tape, it's not bias tape, it's our tie, our drawstring. But anyway, it's just taking it right along there. And a back stitch. And now to finish our short ends, we're just going to bring it here and just kind of close to the edge, stitch across. It's okay if it gets a little bit frayed, it'll kind of give it a cute, playful look, but you don't want it to continue fraying all the way through your tie, so you have to put a stitch in there so it doesn't fray past that stitch. So do that on all 4 ends because you've done 2 ties. There's 2 ends on each tie, so finish every edge of your, every short end of your drawstring. Okay, so we are done, and now we just have to string our drawstring through. So take a safety pin, put it through one end of your drawstring, and this is where you want to follow really carefully so you don't get confused. Okay, you're going to start on one end here of your casing, and you're going to pull this all the way through that casing. Okay, this is for drawstring number 1. I'm going to bring it all the way through this end. Move that second one out of the way. And then just go ahead and pull it a good way down. And then you're going to loop it back through the other side. So on the opposite end. Sorry, this is kind of an awkward position with the camera. Trying to show you and do this at the same time. Okay, so we're going to take it all the way through this end. Okay, so now you have that through here. And now you're going to take this, the end without the safety pin, and you're going to put it through your loop down here. Take your safety pin out, and then you're going to tie a knot. So just do a little knot like this. Okay, that is side 1. Okay, so now you have your second drawstring, and don't get confused, you're going to be threading it through the same casing even though there's already a drawstring in there, but you're going to start on the opposite side. So this side that has the little loop, you're going to start on that side, and you're just going to take it all the way through. Be really careful that your safety pin doesn't open up on you, because that is never fun when that happens. Just take it little by little, very carefully. Grab that safety pin, and then you're going to wrap it back around on the other side of the casing, just like you did on the first one. We're almost there. So you're basically doing the same thing you did on the other side, you're just doing it opposite. You're starting and working from the opposite direction. So, oops. Okay, so now we've got that through. We're going to take this one down here through our little loop. Take out your safety pin and tie it in a knot again. And that is it. You are done. You have your cute drawstring bag. You just pull that up there to cinch it up, and then pull it open. How cute is that? So fun. Here's our little bag. So that was all there is to make the drawstring bag. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments, and I'll be happy to help you whichever way I can. And remember, I'm going to post the link on my website if you want the downloadable version where you can print out the directions to look at them as you go. But hopefully this tutorial helped you out. Make sure to check for more tutorials on my website and on my YouTube channel. And I hope you come back to visit again.